Welcome to the recorded training for the Unit Processes section of the Facility Inventory in SLEIS. In order to navigate to the Unit Processes information for your facility, click the Login link at the Welcome screen and type in your SLEIS user account credentials. You will be taken to the My Facilities screen, where you can see a list of all the facilities your account has been linked to. Some SLEIS users may only have one facility linked to their account, while other users may have multiple facilities linked to their account. Click the Open button under the Actions heading on the right side of the screen for the facility you would like to view information for. Once you click the Open button, you'll be brought to the My Reports screen. This report screen will list all the emissions reports that are available for you to view or submit for once the DNR has created the report. In this case, we are looking at the 2016 emissions report, and you will notice the status is in process. Upon first logging in and viewing your 2016 emissions report, a button with a play icon will be listed. This indicates the report has not yet been started. Click this button to begin working on your emissions report. In this case, the emissions report has already been started, so the status is in process. Once you click the Open button on the My Report screen, you will be taken to the 2016 emissions report screen for the facility. At this screen, you will be able to view the facility inventory and the emissions report. This screen allows the user to view or edit information related to the facility, release points, control devices, emission units, unit processes, and emissions. Click the Unit Processes button to update information related to processes at your facility. After clicking the Unit Processes button, a listing of processes at your facility will appear on the screen. This screen allows you to sort by emission unit identifier, process identifier, and SCC number. The default setting for the display of unit processes is in ascending order by emission unit identifier. Click the Process Identifier header and you will be able to toggle between ascending and descending order by Unit Process Identifier. In the upper right corner of the screen, there is a filter box. If your facility has a large number of unit processes, you can use the filter box to save time when navigating directly to a unit process you would like to update. Simply type in the emission unit identifier, unit process identifier, or emission unit or unit process description, and SLEIS will shorten the list of identifiers to those that have matching results to the criteria you enter in the filter box. SLEIS also allows you to export data related to all of the unit processes that are listed for your facility. Click the Export button in the lower left corner to download a CSV file which contains information related to your unit processes. A folder will open with 5 files. Click the Unit Processes CSV file to view the information related to the unit processes at your facility. You also have the ability to add a unit process at your facility if you have the editor role. Having the editor role allows you to edit information related to unit processes. To add a unit process, click the Add button in the lower right corner of the screen. You'll be taken to a screen that has 5 tabs associated with it. The first tab listed is the Unit Process tab. Throughout the SLEIS database, required data is indicated by a red bar on the left side of the data field. The database will not let you save the record you are on until all required fields have been data entered. First, you must data enter a process identifier as well as select from an existing list of emission unit identifiers for the process that you are adding. When naming the identifier for process, please be consistent with the way the construction permit was issued for the emission unit. In other words, please reference the cover letter for your construction permit for the emission unit to obtain the correct identifier. Once you make a successful save for the unit process, the identifier will not be able to be edited in the future. So make sure the identifier that you use is one that the facility would like to permanently have. After the user has entered the process identifier and linked it to the appropriate emission unit identifier, the next required field is the SCC number. The user may directly enter the 8-digit number by typing in the code text box. If the user enters the 8-digit code in the text box, they need to then select the code from the list that is generated. Once a code is selected, the 4 SCC level descriptions will be populated to the right of the code. If the user doesn't know the SCC code to be data entered, they can instead select each of the 4 individual drop-down menus and choose the description that best describes the process that is occurring at the emission unit. Once each of the 4 levels has been selected, the user can move on to the next data element. The description field is not required because there isn't a red bar on the left side of the field. The last final emissions year should only be used if the process is no longer in operation. Simply enter the 4-digit year that this process last operated in. If the last or final emissions year is a year prior to the emissions report that is being completed, then this process will not be included in the process emissions listing for the emissions report. For example, we are working on the 2016 emissions report for this facility. If the user entered 2015 or a previous year in the last or final emissions year text box, this process would not be included in the list for the 2016 emissions report. If the year is entered as 2016, then the process will be included in the process emissions listing, and SLEIS will expect the user to report throughput and emissions for the process. The comments field is not required, but may be used to provide helpful information for the facility as well as DNR air quality staff. The next tab across the top is the Regulatory Programs tab. This tab will allow the user to select a regulatory program or programs that apply to this process. The user would need to click in the field and begin typing to activate a list of pre-populated options to select from. To add more than one regulatory program, click the Add button indicated by the plus sign, which is located off to the right. To delete a regulatory program, click the Delete button indicated by the trash can icon. A regulatory program is not required to be selected, however. The next tab is the Control Approach tab. This is where the user will link a process to a control device. If the process is not being controlled by a control device, the user should select the Not Controlled checkbox. If the process is being controlled by a control device, then the checkbox should be unchecked. The Control Approach description field does not have a red bar on the left side of the field and is therefore not required. To make the connection complete between the unit process and the control device, the user must click in the Control Devices field and select the control device identifier that is linked to the process. To do this, begin typing the control device identifier or control device description, and a list of control devices that were previously created will appear for the user to select from. Click the control device identifier that is linked to the unit process. A user may add or remove control devices by using the Add and Delete buttons off to the right. When you are done associating control devices to a process, move on to the Release Point Apportionment tab. This is where the user can identify which release point or release points the unit process is venting through. Again, the user would need to click in the field, and a drop-down menu appears that would allow the user to select which release points the process is venting through. In addition to selecting at least one release point, the user must also enter the percentage of emissions that are being vented to the release point that was just selected. The total percentage indicated for the release points venting emissions from this process must equal 100%. If more than one release point is being used to vent emissions from this process, the user would click the Add button to the right to add a second release point. In that case, the percentage for each release point could be entered as 50%. If the user needed to remove a release point from this process, simply click the Delete button to the right of the release point. Once the user has completed the Release Point Apportionment tab, they are ready to move on to the Additional Information tab. None of the data elements that are listed on the Additional Information tab are required. The information displayed is the data related to processes that were migrated from SPARS to SLEIS that were considered to have value-added information to stakeholders or DNR air quality staff. At this point, the user may click the Save button in the lower right corner of the screen. SLEIS will notify the user if the changes were successfully saved or if there are validation errors associated with any of the 5 tabs for the unit process. If there are no validation errors, the user may click the Back button to navigate back to the list of unit processes at the facility. You'll notice under the Actions heading, there are 2 buttons for each unit process. I am logged in as an editor for this facility. Therefore, I have the right to edit any of the unit process information that I choose. If I only have a viewer role for the facility, I would only see the View button, and the Edit button would not be displayed. The rights each user has in SLEIS are completely dependent upon the role that is indicated on the SLEIS Electronic Reporting Registration form. In order to edit a unit process, the user would click the Edit button under the Actions heading for the unit process they're interested in maintaining. The business rules of SLEIS that apply while a user is in edit mode are the same as when a user is creating a new identifier. This concludes the recorded training for the Unit Processes section of the Facility Inventory in SLEIS.